Hey, welcome back, guys. This is Jason, KM4ACK. Today, we're going to be continuing with the Pi Zero project. Stick around, and we'll get right to it. Real quick before we get going today, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below. Okay, a couple of things worth mentioning that came up after I released the video last Tuesday. First of all, I kept saying a Raspberry Pi Zero, and I will probably continue to do that just because that's what I'm calling it. But technically, it is a Raspberry Pi Zero W. The W indicates that it has wireless for Wi-Fi and for Bluetooth built onto it. So a lot of this is not going to work with the original Raspberry Pi Zero, but instead the Zero W. So if I do forget and say Raspberry Pi Zero, please know that I do mean the Zero W. One other thing worth mentioning, someone left a comment on last Tuesday's video that Windows 10 now has OpenSSH installed by default. So you don't have to install PuTTY if you don't want to. You could use the built-in application OpenSSH on Windows 10. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump over to the Pi and see what we can get accomplished today. Okay, so I just got logged into the Pi. Now, I did go ahead and run the update and upgrade commands that we talked about at the end of the last video. But we do need to take care of a few other housekeeping options, and I want to kind of go through that and show you guys how to do it. First of all, you'll notice right here that SSH is enabled, but I'm still running the default username. Our default password rather. So we want to get that changed, and also I want to get this changed so it's not just called Raspberry Pi. If you have multiple Pis on your system, you can quickly become confused. So I'm going to change that to something that makes it a little bit easier for me to recognize on the network. So let's start off with doing sudo space raspi-config. We'll go ahead and press return, and you'll be presented with this screen here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just press enter with option number 1 highlighted. And it's going to ask me for, or tell me that I'm about to be asked for a new password. I'm going to say okay. It's going to dump you back out to the command prompt and ask you for that new password. So I'll enter it once, press return, and it's going to ask me to retype the password. And then it comes back and tells me that it was successfully changed. So that's good to go. The next thing we want to do is come down to network options. And I'm coming down by just using my arrow keys. Remember, we can't use our mouse in this. So we're going to use arrow keys, tab keys, and our enter key to select things. So I'll just go ahead and press enter here. And the first option there, November 1, which is host name, I want to go ahead and press enter right here. And it's going to give me some notes about what's allowed and what's not allowed. Let's go ahead and press enter one more time, and it'll bring me up to this screen here. I'm going to take that out, and for this case, since I only have one Pi Zero attached to the network right now, I'm just going to name this Pi Zero. Once you've got that entered in, oh, notice right here you can't put a space, so I put a hyphen right here instead of a space. Spaces aren't allowed in this area. After you're finished though, press your tab key to select OK and press enter. Now, I'm going to go ahead and press the tab key a couple of times to get down to finish, and it's going to tell me that I need to reboot in order for everything to take effect. Would you like to reboot now? Yep, we're going to go ahead and do that so that we're ready for the next step. Okay, now that the Pi has had a chance to reboot, I'm going to go ahead and log back in with my SSH client, and we'll give it the new password that we just set for the Pi. Go ahead and press return. And now you'll see that we do not get that warning about the default password, and our new host name is displaying here. So we're good to go. Okay, now that we've got the basics out of the way, we're going to head over to GitHub, and that is github.com/KM4ACK. Once we get to this web page, let's go ahead and click on repositories. What we want to do first is get the Hotspot installed and then Hotspot tools. This is the base of the system because I plan on using this only when I am portable and disconnected from the internet. So I definitely want to get the Hotspot installed, test it, and make sure it's working before we go any further. If I can't get this one step working, then the rest of it really doesn't matter to me. So let's click on repositories. Let's come down until we find PyScripts or Py-scripts. I'll go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to scroll down. Now there's several of these that you'll see here. Auto Hotspot in Setup, Auto Hotspot Setup, and Auto Hotspot -Buster. The one we are looking for is this one right here, Auto Hotspot in -Setup. So make sure you grab the right one and don't get confused right here with this step. I'll go ahead and click on that. I'm going to scroll down the page and click on the raw button right here. Once I get to the raw button, make sure your screen looks like this. We'll come right up to the address bar here, and I'm going to copy that address. Now let's move back over to the Pi, and let's start this installation here. Now, on a Pi Zero with Raspbian OS Lite installed, if I run an ls command to list out the directory, you'll see that we have none of, or no directories and no files in our home folder. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new directory by using mkdir space downloads. Go ahead and press return. If we run the ls command again, you'll see that we have that new directory. So let's move into that directory with cd space downloads. Now, guys, remember when we're working with the command line, everything is case sensitive. So if you used a lowercase d on the front of downloads instead of a capital D, you will not be moved into that directory. You're going to get an error message. Once we're inside this directory, let's type wget space, and I'm just going to paste in that, that address that I just copied. Let's go ahead and hit return and give that just a couple of seconds to download. Now, let's tell you what, let me clear that screen. Okay, so if we run the ls command now, you'll see that we have Auto Hotspot in our downloads directory. Let's make that executable with chmod +x and give it the file name again, which is Auto Hotspot in -setup. We press return. If we run the ls command one more time, you'll see that that file is now in green, indicating that it is executable. Now, this is one of those commands that we need to run with sudo. So let's run sudo /auto hotspot in -setup. Go ahead and press return, and we'll give that just a few minutes to run. Now, it will come up and ask you for a password. The first password that it asks you for is going to be the password you use to connect to the Pi when it's in hotspot mode. And the password needs to be between 8 and 63 characters long. So I'm going to go ahead and enter mine there and press return. It's going to ask me if it's correct. I'm going to say yes, and a couple more seconds, and it's going to ask me for some more information here. So it's asking me, what SSID would you like to connect to? So I'm going to go ahead and enter. Now, this is the same credentials that we put in the WPA_supplicant file. So that's my SSID and my password. And I'll go ahead and hit return again. It's going to ask me again if this is correct, and I'm going to say yes. Now, the downside to this is it's going to give us a double entry in our WPA supplicant file. I'm reusing an old script, and before I didn't include the WPA supplicant file. on the boot drive because I would plug up a Cat 5 cable. I've just kind of changed up the way I've done things, so it only adds one additional step. So let's clear that screen, and let's go fix that double entry real quick. So sudo nano /etc/WPA underscore supplicant, and then WPA supplicant.conf. Go ahead and press return on that, and you'll see here that we now have two entries. So the first one is here, and the second one is down below it. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. I'm going to get to the first line, and I'm going to use Control K to get rid of each line. It's just a quick way to cut out lines inside the Nano editor. Now that I'm done, I'm going to press Control S. It'll tell me that it wrote those 9 lines to the file, and then I'm going to press Control X to get out of it. And that takes care of cleaning up that one little glitch. So it only adds one extra little step for us. Now let's go ahead and head back over to GitHub. And I'm just going to use the back button in my browser to come back. I'm going to, let's see, I need to come back one more time because I want to get back to the repositories page. So if you just came in from the front by going to github.com, you just click repositories here and it would bring you back to this page. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install Hotspot tools. Be very careful here because we're going to install an old version of Hotspot tools. Hotspot tools 2, which you see right here, requires a GUI interface. We don't have the GUI interface on the Pi Zero. So we're going to scroll on down, and I'm looking for Hotspot tools. Now, currently this says archived. I'm thinking about going in and changing this depending on how far I go with this Pi Zero project. But you may see something that says Hotspot Tools Lite because this is the original version of Hotspot Tools. And I just kind of archived it to leave it there for historical reference. But now I may open that repository back up and use it as a light version that doesn't require the GUI interface. And that way we can continue to make improvements going forward to that script. But let's go ahead and click inside of Hotspot Tools. Scroll down the page just a little bit, and we're looking for this button right here that says Code. We'll click on that. I'm going to highlight all of this line here. Make sure you get all of it, and I'm going to copy that. Now we can head back over to the Pi. Okay, so one of the things you're going to come to learn working with the light version of the Raspbian OS is we don't have some of the basic tools installed that we're used to on the full-blown versions of the Raspbian OS. Git is one example of that. So let's go ahead and get this installed so that we can use that command to clone our repository. So let's use sudo apt-get install git. We'll go ahead and press return on that and give that just a couple of seconds to install. Now that we have that installed, let's go ahead and just clear that screen. Now we can use the command git space clone space, and I'm going to paste in that repository link that we had that we copied just a minute ago from the GitHub site. Oh, and I am about to make a mistake here. One thing you definitely want to do, you want to make sure that you're in your home directory. Right now I'm in the downloads directory, so I'm just going to type cd and return, and that will put us back in our home directory. So now I can run the git clone and paste in that command. We'll go ahead and press return and give that just a couple of seconds to get installed. Now that we've got that installed, let's move over to that directory with cd space hotspot-tools. We'll press return, and I'm going to run the ls command. Let's go ahead and clear that screen real quick, run that ls command again. Now, the main tool that we're looking for here is this one, hotspot-menu. And guys, this will only run when you're inside the Hotspot-Tools directory. We might fix that in a future version of the video, but for now, just come into your Hotspot Tools directory, and then we're going to run /hotspot-menu. We'll go ahead and press return, and we'll be presented with this screen here. Again, if you've been with Build-A-Pi for a while, you probably recognize this right away. If not, it's just a set of tools that we can use to manage the hotspot. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the SSID of the hotspot. So I'm going to choose option 1 here, and it asks me if I want to change the hotspot name. I'm going to say yes. And what do I want the new name to be? Pi-0. Don't use any spaces here, it won't work, but we'll just give it Pi-0 and go ahead and press return. It's going to ask me next if I want to change the password, and I don't. That is already set to where I want it, so I'm going to say no. It's going to ask me if the information is correct. I'll let it know it is, and it's making changes. Now, I am going to get a reboot required setting here. For now, I'm going to choose no. And you'll see that my new name is showing up right here. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of the current Wi-Fi information that the Pi is connected to. So let's choose option 6 for Manage SSIDs. I'll go ahead and press return. And I want to remove a Wi-Fi. So I'm going to choose option 1 here and press return. It's going to give me a list of the currently known SSIDs. I'm going to type this out. Now, the name must match exactly in order for all of this to work. So I'm going to give it KM4ACK-2 mesh, and this is case sensitive. So let's go ahead and press return there. It's going to tell me that it has been removed. If we want to double check that, we can use option 7 to look at the known SSIDs. And you'll see that there is nothing listed right here in this space. Press any key to continue. At this point, I want to go ahead and exit out of the Hotspot tools. So I'm going to use option 10 to do that. And we want to reboot our Raspberry Pi because we want to verify that the hotspot is working correctly. So we'll use sudo reboot. We'll give that a couple of minutes to reboot, and I'll come back in and show you guys how to verify that the hotspot is actually working. Now that the Pi has had a chance to reboot, I'm going to go up to my Wi-Fi connections on the Mac, and I'm looking for the Pi-0. That's the SSID that we assigned to the hotspot. So I'll go ahead and click on Pi-0, and it's going to ask me for the password. So I'm going to enter the password that I gave it. In my case, it was KM4ACK1234. We'll go ahead and say join the network. Once you have an indication that you have joined the network, we can now SSH back into the Pi again. This time though, instead of using the address that we used prior to this, I'm going to use SSH 10.10.10.10. And let's tell it who we are. So I'm going to say pi at 10.10.10.10. And you may get a warning that looks like this, saying the authenticity of the host can't be established. Do I want to continue? Yes, I trust this host because it's mine. Now it's going to ask me for my Pi password. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And we are logged in. Let's clear the screen real quick. And let's move over to the Hotspot Tools directory. I'll list that out one more time. Let's run /hotspot-menu again. We'll press return, and now you can see that the state is active, indicating that the Raspberry Pi is actively broadcasting out an SSID that you can connect to. So let's do a couple of more things here. Let's go ahead and add the SSID back so that it can connect to my shack Wi-Fi. So I'm going to use option 6 here, and then option 2 to add a Wi-Fi. It'll take it a couple of seconds to scan, and then it'll present you with a list of what it can connect to. So I'm going to say KM4ACK-2 and we'll give it the password. Let's go ahead and press return. It's going to ask me if everything is correct and remind me that this information is case sensitive. When I choose yes here, it's going to go ahead and attempt to connect to the Wi-Fi. Now, this presents a bit of a problem. You'll see right here that it says shutting down the hotspot. Well, what that also did was it disconnected me from the Pi 0 SSID. So I'm going to have to go back to my home router and connect to it, and then use the first IP address to SSH back into the Pi. Okay, so I went ahead and connected back up to my home Wi-Fi and reestablished the SSH connection with the Pi 0. Let's cover one more thing before we call it a day on this video. What we want to do is we want to make it so that the Pi 0 checks for the hotspot, checks for known SSIDs roughly every 5 or 10 minutes. That's up to you. If it sees a known SSID, we want it to connect. If it doesn't see one, then we want it to go ahead and generate the hotspot. So I'm going to go and run crontab space -e. We'll press return. And since I've never used cron on this machine, it's going to ask me which editor I'd like to use. I'm just going to choose Nano for this session. So option 1 and return. It'll bring me into this file. Now, everything that begins with the £sign at the beginning is just a comment. So if we look, there's nothing but comments in this file. I'm going to take just a second, use my Control K or Control and K keys to get rid of everything inside of this file. This gives me a nice clean file to work with. So I'm going to make a comment, and remember, comments start with the £sign, and we'll just say hotspot check. The next line I'm going to, and I've copied and pasted this, but let me explain what's going on here. We've got a */5. That tells cron to run this command every 5 minutes. Now, in addition to that, we've got a space, star, space, star, space, star, space, star. One more space, and then the actual command. So you can do a little reading on cron and learn different ways to use this over here to run things automatically in the background at given times. In our case, though, this will work just fine. Now, the /5 right here indicates that we want it to run every 5 minutes, which in my particular case is fine. But you could change that to 10 or 15 if you didn't want this script to run quite as often. Once you have this information pasted in, let's press Control S and then Control X. You'll get a notice from cron saying that it has installed the new cron tab. Now, every 5 minutes, the hotspot is going to check and see if it can see a known SSID, connect to it if it can. If it can't see a known SSID, it's going to generate the hotspot that you can connect to when you're in the field. All right, guys, I wanted to dive into some ham radio stuff, but I felt it important to get this piece of the puzzle established first. So, and this video is already running a bit long, so we will save the ham radio specific stuff for the next video. We'll see you guys then. 7-3.